Are punishments bad or good? What do you think? There are a lot of parenting viewpoints out there related to punishments, and we're going to be talking about some of those today. I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach all about parenting, good communication, how to build strong family bonds, and child development, all through the lens of the principle self-government. And in this video, we're talking about punishments. Punishment is a word that feels negative to most people. And I think that's why there are a lot of opinions related to the concept of punishments. In fact, there are many people chiming in, more so now than just a few years ago. And that's because parenting goes through trends or cycles. In fact, usually what happens is parenting paradigms are kind of on a pendulum, and they swing from that very bully, fear-based, I'm going to make you worry about a bad decision you make, to let's just be their friend and make everything fluffy and nice. It goes back and forth and back and forth, and people don't know exactly where to land. Well, in this video, we're going to be talking about that perfect sweet spot in parenting and how that relates to punishments, if punishments are necessary, if there is a better way to phrase it, or something else we should be thinking about when we're talking about teaching our children cause and effect. I'm going to be completely honest at the very beginning. I don't like the word punishments because the word punishment actually suggests being vindictive about a person. There's something negative about it that I really don't like the word. But that doesn't mean I do not believe in teaching children cause and effect. And that does not mean that I don't believe in helping children learn cause and effect by giving them the opportunity to accept consequences, because consequences are part of life. And if you try to remove consequences from the upbringing of a child, you are actually raising them in a vacuum, because they will then think that anything that they do should not have to have consequences attached to it. And some natural consequences do not manifest until years later. And so if you just focus on natural consequences, your child can end up getting hurt developmentally. So sometimes artificial consequences are appropriate. Sometimes they are even the most merciful. So let's talk about that, because I just said I don't like punishments, and aren't all punishments essentially just negative consequences? Well, maybe, but I think sometimes when people get into that punishment mindset, they get emotionally attached to consequences, and they start finding consequences that are just going to emotionally manipulate their children, kind of twist a knife in their child to make the child feel pain. The whole idea of punishment is, I feel pain, I'm being inconvenienced, so you should feel pain too. Twist, 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 right? I don't agree with that. Now, I know some people say, yeah, but in the Bible, Nicholeen, God even talks about punishments, and there's punishments that happen with people in the Bible, so surely the concept of punishments is something that's a good thing. Well, maybe. I do think that even when it comes to the Bible, that there are people who feel like that God is somehow hating his children that he's needing to teach cause and effect to, or if there was a law and they broke the law and he needed to teach them that breaking the law has consequences, that somehow there's some emotional thing there where God is vengeful at his children, or he hates his children. And I just don't see it that way. He's a God of order. He loves his children, and he is a God of love and peace. And that order suggesting that there's right and wrong and good and bad and true and false. So he's a teacher, isn't he? He teaches, he instructs, he prepares, but he also chastens, which means sometimes he needs to bring people back to truth. But that doesn't mean, chasten does not mean gets angry. That's not necessarily what that means. And by the way, I have a lot of other videos on this channel that relate to spanking and sparing the rod and what does the Bible say about spanking and those types of things. So I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on that. I do have firm opinions on that. I'm not a big spanking fan, and there is a reason for that, because God doesn't just say spare the rod and spoil the child, but he also says to raise your child by rod and staff. If you understand the ancient understanding of shepherding, then you know that the staff is used to guide the sheep gently, and the rod is used to beat the wolves away from the sheep. So if you raise a child by rod and staff, that doesn't mean that you ever beat a child. So that's the summed up version, but you can find out more information about spanking and what I think about that by watching other videos on this channel. So are punishments bad then? Well, I don't like the word. And I would say that the word is misleading and probably could even lead people to be emotional with each other. I think if children hear the word punishment all the time, then I think they start to thinking of themselves as bad. So I don't like the word punishment. I do like the word consequence. I think consequence suggests that a person has been pre-taught ahead of time, that they know the law completely in the first place. They know what negative consequences and what positive consequences will occur if certain actions happen. That is full disclosure. That's full understanding. That's just good, solid teaching so that a person can make proper decisions, which means that they can actually self-govern themselves. So, do I believe in consequences? Absolutely. Are consequences good? Yes. What type of consequences are good? Well, we need to talk about that too. I think there are many people in the positive parenting movement, because remember I talked about trends. There are trends in parenting, and there's this pendulum that swings from side to side in pendulum. In the positive parenting movement, there are people that are very critical of ever having consequences for children. In fact, I recently heard a conversation by a person who really professes to be like the perfect parent out there. And this woman was talking about how a person who she was talking to was talking about the liberation that came to her as she abided by the counsel of this other woman and decided to not have any consequences, to not worry about talking to their child about negative consequences, but instead to just embrace the child where they were at. And I thought to myself, okay, we're missing a couple of principles here. Principle number one, teaching. We do have to teach our children, otherwise they end up being misled, oftentimes usually by their own emotions, and they will oftentimes end up entitled and not accept teaching from other people. And this could also cause the child to not have good interrelationships, meaning they can't work well with other people, they're not open-minded, they can't learn from other people. They do need to have the opportunity to learn. But the other principle is that parents are supposed to be teachers. If the parents don't teach and the child doesn't learn, the roles are thrown completely off, and then dysfunction happens. Now, I don't know if this parenting guru who, self-proclaimed, was saying that she is suggesting that this other parent not do any teaching, but that's what it sounded like to me. And it sounded like the happy place was that the child does whatever they're going to do and the parent just fully accepts it. Now, that may sound good because the parent does need to accept that a child has made a mistake, but that doesn't mean that the parent backs off from doing any corrections for the child. The parent does need to step into their role and magnify that role. One of the biggest problems that we're having in society right now is parents not understanding their role. Now, if a parent is hitting or beating their child, if they are verbally abusing them, tearing them down, that's not their role. That's not what they're meant for. Their role is to be a teacher, to lead and guide their children. In fact, when I wrote this book, Parenting a House United, which is the book I'm probably the most known for because it talks about all of the skills of parenting and the skills that the children need to have to learn self-government. I thought when I wrote this book that people understood roles, which meant that they understood who they were supposed to be to each other. But then people started asking me questions like, well, what if they won't listen to you? Well, what if they don't care? You know, those types of things. And I thought, well, that's a roles issue. They should know that you're their teacher and that they're the learner and that they need to be paying attention to you, that you are there as a gift and a blessing for them. That's what parents are. That's what nurture means, that you're supposed to guide them and direct them. So then I had to write this book, Roles, The Secret to Family, Business, and Social Success, which is a great book to read aloud with your children and to discuss if you feel like the children may need to go back to that ground zero position of like, who are we to each other? What is the role of a 15-year-old son or a 7-year-old daughter? What is the role of mother? What is the role of father? And I'm not talking about who makes the dinner, because anybody can do that. Those are just responsibilities. I'm talking about who you really are to each other. Did you know that a mother is the heart and hearthstone of her family? What does that mean for the family to carry on that role for the family? So understanding who you are to each other is important. A parent is a teacher. That is one of their primary roles for their children. And if they don't do teaching, meaning they don't do correcting, they don't do praising, they don't give feedback to their children, then their children ultimately suffer. In fact, the whole family dynamic ends up suffering. So what types of consequences do we want to focus on then? Now, I could go into great length about positive consequences and praising and telling the child the good things that they've done, and I've got a whole other video for that, so I'm not going to waste your time with that here. But I feel like if you are watching this video, then you are probably wanting to know what types of negative consequences would Nicholeen use then to teach her children, things that would not be considered punishments. Well, I actually like to use work, extra chores, and let me explain why. So Samuel Smiles, who was a philosopher from the 1800s, wrote a book called Character. In that book, he said that work is the antidote for a sick character, and it's true. The more societies pull away from the concept of work, the more the society and the freedom in that society starts to crumble, because they lack the character development, but also the confidence that comes with doing work. Now, work is something that has to be accepted. It's an action that a person has to do. It's not something that you can do to another person. Sure, you can assign them a task, but they have to choose to actually do it to accept that consequence. So I believe in the 4 basic skills of self-government. When a person knows self-government, that means they know how to follow instructions from themselves and others, accept no answers from themselves and others. That means observing boundaries and stuff like that too. They also know how to accept consequences, which means they can take personal responsibility for their own choices and their own behaviors and thoughts. And then they can also disagree appropriately. If a person is not given the opportunity to accept consequences, the person does not learn self-government. That means that every problem that does befall them in their lives, they will think of as somebody else's fault. If you want your child to have a healthy upbringing, then the best thing that a parent can do, the most healthy thing, is to give the child the opportunity to accept a consequence. Because then the child learns, oh, I made a choice and I knew ahead of time this is what I could be choosing, and now I will accept it and I will move on. It teaches them they can move on from any bad moment that they've had, and that they can put in a little effort and make a change in their life. The symbolism in accepting a little extra chore, whether that extra chore is, I need you to clean the bathroom sink, or I need you to take this piece of paper and put it in the trash, or take your shoes to be on the front door mat, something like that. Those little extra chores teach a person, I can accept stuff. I can take personal responsibility. So extra chores are absolutely my favorite negative consequence because the child has to accept them, and I don't even give them the opportunity to do those extra chores unless they have a calm face, voice, and body, and they can do all of the 6 steps to accepting a consequence. So you'll probably want to learn a little bit more about that skill of accepting a consequence, and I'll tell you where you can find out more about that in just a moment. But first, I want you to know that taking away things from children usually ends up resulting in a power struggle. Now, occasionally you can determine ahead of time, all right, if this happens, then this will be the negative consequence, such as if you look at bad things on your phone, then you will lose the opportunity to use your phone for a period of time. That type of thing, if it is set up ahead of time, does not lead as much to manipulation. So you can have some other negative consequences if you feel like they are appropriate for your children, but just keep in mind you don't want to use too many of those because they do need to have the opportunity to accept consequences by performing an action so that they practice putting in a little bit of work for their future lives. If you want to learn more about accepting consequences and all of the 4 basic skills, as well as the other skills for how to correct children, you probably want to see my full-length class that's on this channel called The Not So Known Secret for Parenting Success. Click on the link to that video now. I'll see you there.